right. Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I'm Lynn Snow. I'm the lay service leader, and we are so delighted to have all of you here today. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Tuscaloosa, a covenantal community founded on love and a common devotion to our free faith. We recognize all the earth as sacred ground, and we welcome each other into this space. We especially welcome those visiting with us this morning. We're so glad you're here. We invite you to fill out the yellow visitor sheet when the offering bowl comes around. You can give it to any member after the service. Any announcements for today? Okay. Let me say that I believe that next Sunday is our last Sunday with Reverend Amanda as our contract minister. That's because it's July 3rd, right? So I encourage everyone to make sure that they attend next Sunday. And we'll send her off in style and also get to hear from her. In order to cultivate an environment of peace in ourselves and our sanctuary, we invite you to unplug for the next hour and turn your devices off. If you must leave yours on, please set it on silent mode. And as always, we have important announcements in the printed order of service. And please feel free to take the announcement home. And just a reminder to keep up with the announcements on Newsnet and the newsletter. As we move into July, we will be moving into the summer holiday period for the church. And so that will be an important way for all of us to keep in contact until we resume in August. We light this chalice as a beacon of our faith and as a reminder of our commitment to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We worship together by celebrating that which is sacred to us individually and collectively. And today's reading is from Reverend William J. Barber II, one of the co-leads of the Poor People's Campaign, and we are so delighted today to have Dr. Pamela Payne Foster with us, Tuscaloosa chairperson for the Poor People's Campaign, who will be delivering our talk today and sharing the good news about the important work from that group. So Dr. Barber says, Dr. King was called a troublemaker and even a race baiter 45 years ago as he led the call for civil rights and economic justice movement. He called for a poor people's movement to address the glaring realities of poverty, even as he loved America enough to say, "Let us be dissatisfied until America will no longer have a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds." So our opening hymn is going to be a good one, I'm sure, and I've just misplaced my order of service after telling you all to have it handy. Be Thou My Vision, number 20. And it's that in the... Please stand and body your spirit as you are able. I should acknowledge that I am the lay leader for today, but I'm no song leader, so so please lift your voices loud when we sing, because I'm struggling. So as we gather in loving community, we remember that we do not travel this earth alone. We share our lives as we light candles and hold each other in meditative thought and reverence. We invite you to come forward and light a candle from the common flame. You may do so in silence, or speaking loudly. You may give your name and briefly share a milestone from your life. I'll light one candle to start us. And my celebration is that we had a wonderful Father's Day lunch last week for both my father and my father-in-law. It was really enjoyable.
Good morning. I'm Jim Colby, and you may notice that I am solo this morning, but all is well. I always say Teresa and I are not connected at the hip, but I do carry her close to my heart. Teresa is staying at home this morning and representing our congregation at the annual Unitarian Universalist Assembly. This year she's attending it virtually, which is being held in Portland, Oregon this year. And she's been very active in quite a few workshops, and her mind is being filled with new ideas, which I'm sure she will share it with us when probably next week when she comes back. And so, yeah, that's where she is today.
Good morning. I want to thank everyone who's been so gracious to me. I'm going to light 2 candles. Today I'm lighting one because today's my birthday. And so next year I'll make 80. So that's for one. And then the other is for an event that I attended yesterday with a friend in Shelby County. And Shelby County was the place that the first arrow, I think, was pierced our move toward justice when the Voting Rights Act was changed. And so a friend of mine, a person I've made friends with in the last 8 or so years, invited me to go, and it was a moving event, and so I'm going to light a candle for that. That was yesterday. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, today, I so love you guys so much. Congratulations. Thank you.
My name is Karen Cronice. I remember the day when the Supreme Court passed Roe v. Wade, and I look forward to the next time the Supreme Court returns a woman's right to choose.
I'll now light a final candle for all burdens and celebrations that went unspoken. May the warm light of these flames bring us peace. And now let's take a moment to spend some time together in silence. If you'd like, you can close your eyes and just follow your breath for a couple of moments. We are born in the middle of the human story, and we will leave in the middle. We cannot change what came before, and we will not be a part of what comes after. Let us make the most of our middle. May our middle help the story matter. And now we will sing together hymn number 123, Spirit of Life. Out of gratitude for all that we have been given and all that we have now, we share our resources because we love and trust one another, and because this church enriches our lives and empowers us to make our world better. We rely upon each other, members and friends, and we appreciate the payment of pledges and the generous donations to support the legacy, vision, and work of this church community. All cash and undesignated checks will be divided between our Split the Plate recipient, which is listed in our announcement flyer today, and our congregation. Please mark your pledge payment to UUCT in the memo line. If you prefer to write a check to the selected organization, please mail it directly to the address in the program insert. By the work of our hands and the generosity of our hearts, our love is made real. Thank you for these gifts. And now it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Pamela Payne Foster. I have the joy of being a colleague of hers at the university, but today she is talking with us as the chairperson for the Tuscaloosa chapter of the Poor People's Campaign, which is such an important organization, and we are really excited to learn more and hear what happened last week.
Thank you so much. I didn't realize I was going to be doing a sermon, but be ever so ready, right? That's what my pastor says. I'm a member of a Christian Community Church here in Tuscaloosa. My pastor is Clarence Sutton Jr. Many of you may know him as Kip Sutton, former principal at Central High School. He's now been promoted up to Huntsville, where he's a deputy superintendent. So he goes back and forth between Huntsville and our church. This is my second time being in this congregation. I had the pleasure of coming to a memorial service here several years ago, and so I'm so delighted to see this young lady who gave you her love. Her father was my research coordinator for a project I did called Project Faith, Eric Cooks. So she doesn't remember me, but I sure remember her. Who could forget her? And so I'm just delighted to be back here again. She's looking like, I think I kind of know her. She's trying to get it together. Yes. So I thought what I'd do today is really kind of give you a background. Many of you know about the Poor People's Campaign and the work of the Poor People's Campaign, but I thought I'd give a refresher, a little background on how it got started and what we've been doing over the last couple of years. And of course, I went with 13 other people from Tuscaloosa on a bus. We left on Friday early in the morning. We went and picked up a crew from Gadsden, Alabama. We made a couple of different stops and went over to Roanoke, Virginia, stayed overnight, and then went up to Washington, D.C. for the national rally. There were other buses from Alabama, Mobile, Huntsville, Montgomery, Selma, I think Tuskegee. So we had a great representation from Alabama, but people from many states, really all over the world. So I'll talk a little bit about my impressions of that rally. But of course, rallies are great, protests are great, but our aim is to really begin to start working from that event June 18th in Washington, D.C. Look, I don't know the exact count. I don't know if some of you saw it, maybe live stream or on TV, but there were thousands of people there. And I guess the greatest joy for me was there were so many young people, which is what we really need. We're in the old category. I'm sorry, Lynn. We're past middle age now. Maybe we're still middle age. 79 is a good a rally point. I'm still middle aged compared to that, maybe. But getting right behind you, Monty, right behind you. But that was my greatest joy, to see so many young people really energized and involved. So I've got a sheet. I think they might have passed it out. I'm not sure. That really talks about 7 action items. There should be another. Yes, 7 action items. Reverend Barber, we're not sitting on our laurels at all, and Reverend Liz. Those are 7 action items, and a lot of them are going to really come back to our recent events. Well, Monty talked about the Shelby versus Holder case, which really started sort of chipping away at voting rights and civil rights. The last couple of days with the overturn of the Roe versus Wade is just devastating for those of us who are really interested in women's rights, reproductive rights. But there was another case the day before that in New York. The Supreme Court shut down the gun control legislation in New York State. Really did not want to do open carry, sort of public display of guns, which we know is not a good thing, not a good idea. So they shut that down as well. So we've got a lot of things to really fight for. I'm just so proud of this congregation's efforts and the long history of Unitarian Church around social justice and human rights issues. So about the Poor People's Campaign, as many of you know, it was really the vision of Martin Luther King Jr. In '68, and it really was his vision right before he got killed in Memphis, Tennessee. As you know, he went to Memphis really on behalf of the sanitation workers, so really fighting for equal, better pay and economic issues. So he had, of course, many of you know, he had shifted from civil rights, voting rights to economic rights, which is really at the core of what we're talking about with the Poor People's Campaign. He called it a revolution of values in America is what he was calling for. He sought to build a broad fusion movement, and that's why I'm here at the Unitarian Church. I'm happy to say we know Martin Luther King was Christian in his values, but he called on the Unitarians, he called on Jewish, those of Jewish faith, of many faiths, and those who were not Christian at all or not of any particular faith. He wanted everybody. And that really is the power that he saw, the fusion, the power of the impact of many, many people coming together. That's the whole idea of the rally. We want to see thousands of people, and we think there were thousands there in D.C., really fighting for this cause, because fighting to unite poor and marginalized communities around these issues, because honestly, if there are 140 million poor and low income in this country, if they would vote, things could change. So that is, if you look at the 7 points, it's really about getting people to the polls, getting people to vote, to really make the connections between all these things around poverty. So in addition to poverty, of course, which is the core of the Poor People's Campaign, we're also talking about systemic racism. We're also talking about ecological devastation, so climate change. If people can make those connections, because a lot of us are in different lanes. We were just talking about Moms Demand Action. I'm co-lead with Judith Taylor with Moms Demand Action, but as I'm a public health physician, preventive medicine public health physician, I see all these links, and they come together. So systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, militarism in the war economy, because we know, and Reverend Barbara and Reverend Liz will talk about all the money going to wars, and that could be shifted to really dealing with some of these issues around poverty. Another one is distorted moral narrative of religious nationalism. We've seen that over and over again. It sort of blends in with the politics, but really trying to get people of faith to really understand that these are faith issues as well. And last one that we've just really kind of added on, so this goes beyond Dr. King's, but it was probably I know it was his vision as well, is the denial of health care. Because there's a slide that I give to my students that in '66 he talked about the greatest inequity in the U.S. is the denial of health care, is in health care. So we've added that one on. So those, since we really started reorganizing, Reverend William Barber, many of you know, very eloquent speaker. I love the quote he gave Lynn, and his co-lead, Reverend Liz Theardis. They really came together around 2018. So this has been a more recent coming together around that vision. Really started sort of organizing different states. Started out with about 40 states, and that was around the time that they came to Alabama to organize us here in Alabama. Carolyn Foster is our state chair. Lynn, she's involved with Greater Birmingham Ministries. I don't know if many of you know up in Birmingham. And they're sort of our anchor group for the state. We've got 3 tri-chairs here in Alabama. We always have to have someone, and we always are pushing for leadership within the Poor People's Campaign of those who are impacted by poverty. So Wanda Bryant is that person is our tri-chair, and then we have a third tri-chair. Tani is from the Mobile area. So those are all that fusion movement. We're really looking for people from everywhere. So at that rally, lots of unions, lots of denominational churches, lots of different organizations, lots of different groups, youth groups within churches there at the rally. Lots of unions, so that's a plus. That's really a plus as well. One of the things I was also impressed with, we had great speakers, of course, but at the heart of the rally was hearing from impacted people from all of the states. So we heard the stories of what issues are impacting the poor around the country now. Of course, healthcare, denial of Medicaid was one issue, but one that struck me that I hadn't really thought about a lot was disability issues, how that really impacts people's, they really are impacted economically by disabilities. And one of the, over and over, we heard stories of not getting disability funding, especially for seniors. So thinking about as I get older, Monty, our incomes, we become retired, but we also, some of us go on disability and fixed incomes, and thinking about how that impacts us around poverty. So we have to think about those things. There was a teacher there who talked about the educational system and how that impacts communities of poor and low-income communities. So he's and also the gun issues. He said his students asked him, can you keep us safe? And he said, I had to lie to them and said, yes, I can, but I don't know if that's a reality. So in this day and age. Cornel West was there, so he was a great energizing speaker. Latasha Brown is a activist from Selma, now in Atlanta, co-founder of Black Voters Matter. Her talk impressed me, but I'm telling you, the person that brought down the house was Reverend Bernice King, the daughter of Reverend Martin Luther King, because she was really the connection with his vision. After King died, Coretta Scott, really carried on this Poor People's Campaign vision, but Bernice King, and of course she sounds just like her father, just oratorily and, the preaching, the anointed got passed down to his anointing got passed down to her, so she was just phenomenal and really brought home what this message is all about. So I also wanted to give you a little bit of, I told you 140 million Americans affected. I wanted to kind of hone in on Alabama. So there are 2.1 million residents who are poor and low wealth in Alabama. That's a lot of people. Because I don't know how many we have. We don't have that many in Alabama. Maybe, is it 4 or 5 million? Almost half, really. Also, as you know, Alabama the Beautiful, state legislators refused to expand Medicaid, even though 7 of 10 residents support it. So that's also an issue we have to continue to fight for. Alabama is one of 3 states that still taxes groceries, which puts a strain on already tight budgets of poor and low-income families, so that's another issue as well. So we've got a lot of work, of course, to do in Alabama. I just wanted to give some statistics about who those 2 million people are. 45% are, I'm looking here, no, 59% are Black, 64% are Latinx, and 37% are white. So it's 762,000. The raw numbers is actually higher for whites, 1.1 million, 141,000 Latinx, and 62,000 Blacks. So those are our numbers there. So the fusion is important because it's not just people of color. There are many white poor as well. So we've got to debunk that myth that it's just people of color who are poor and low income. We've got others as well. So the movement declaration to reconstruct American democracy. So that's one issue that Reverend Barber talks about, we need a third reconstruction. We know in history the first reconstruction was the Civil War, really dealing with slavery and economic issues. Remember, that's a piece of it. The second reconstruction was the Civil Rights Movement, 50s and 60s, where Martin Luther King Jr. led the way, but this is a third Reconstruction that we really need, because we're talking about moral issues here. So that's, of course, King was Christian, his coming from that standpoint. So undergirding the movement definitely was a Christian, faith-based movement, and that's why the emphasis on moral. It's the right thing to do. These are issues that are right things to do. Increase the minimum wage, you know. It's less than 10 in some places. We should increase it up higher so people can at least live. Housing is still a major issue, usually in large cities, but even in rural areas. I was doing a study in Pickens County, and you know, there are no single-family homes in some of these rural counties where we live. So people don't have a place to live. So how can they stay and work a job if it's in that county? So those are issues as well. So we need a third Reconstruction to really deal with these issues. And voting rights is the other issue. As many of you know, the numbers demographically are changing. As we talk about that 140 million people that could vote, we've got to get them to the polls. There are also people of color and other ethnic racial groups that we have to really work with as well. So I've got this long declaration here and then the 7 action items. I'm just going to go through this declaration because I think that the points in it are important, and then I'll read the 7 action items, and then we can kind of talk about where we all fit in this effort. Surely our biggest challenge, I can tell you right now, is trying to really have people who are impacted come and be a part of our organization and also lead. And so we have to try to first bring them in and try to do some leadership development to get them to want to step up and tell their stories. Because we know the stories are powerful. Those testimonies were powerful at the rally. So that's our big point. But of course, organizations also helping with monetarily and just whatever organizing we do is important as well. I should add that there were 14 people from Tuscaloosa. 8 of those were University of Alabama graduate students, and it's interesting, all of them were international. All of them were Nigerian. So it was just the way we sort of organized. We had organized some students to go to Selma when Dr. Barber and Dr. Liz were there to do the cross-bridging, and they happened to be international. We had just the way we had organized it. We organized African students. Our job was also kind of give them some history lessons because they don't know the history of the civil rights movement. When we went up on the bus, we listened to Eyes on the Prize. We did the whole full documentary series so they could see the connection with the civil rights movement. And but it was good, and it was challenging. Getting on a bus with 8 students, with them wanting to do what they tried to make us late. One wouldn't get up in the morning. We had to get up like 3 in the morning. She was still in the bed. 2 of them decided to walk across. We had dinner. It was late at night, and they were cold on the bus, so they decided to walk across the highway to Walmart to get a blanket. And didn't tell me they were going. I'm looking for them, like, where are they? And the students are like covering for them. So it was quite a lot of drama, but it was still fun. We, the thousands gathered here in active declaration of a rapidly growing front of organized moral fusion power, and in deep solidarity with those rising up across the country who are demanding a reconstruction of this democracy and a reconstitution of the policy and legal priorities of this nation, say, we are in a time of emergency. We gather in Washington, D.C. for a mass Poor People's and Low-Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls in a dark summer as our democracy is threatened by a state-by-state coordinated assault on the right to vote and imperiled by open violence, greed, obstruction, distortions, and denial, while more than 140 million poor and low-wealth people of every race, creed, religion, in every region of the country are rising up daily across growing indignities, pain, injury, and death at the hands of the immoral policies and interlocking injustices. even after historic numbers of people, including those gathered here, voted in 2020 and said we must do more in a collective act of faith during the grief of a global pandemic, our democracy remains in an untenable, fragile place. It is bending under the unrelenting weight of an orchestrated attack on our rights to vote for the purpose of further entrenching anti-democratic, non-majority power. And we are facing an attempt to stop the power of this movement and what our presence and witness represents. We see the truth and we say the truth. If the assault on this democracy prevails, the consequences will be felt across generations. We see and say that we come here in the shadow of mass death, insurrection, an attempted coup, and in a time in our nation's history when it is openly known that there are those in political office and running for political office who are working with grotesque resources to seek to overthrow the will of the people of the United States again. And we come with the sight and insight to go ahead of us to generationally transform resurrection possibilities of a third reconstruction of this democracy and this country. As we gather in Washington, D.C. before Congress, before this Supreme Court that unchecked threatens to decay our constitutionally protected right to justice and equal protection under the law, and before this White House, we declare that we are 143 days between today, June 18, 2022, and the last day of the midterm elections on November 8th. On the ballot are 469 seats in Congress, 34 in the Senate, 435 in the House. We stand together today without the full protections of a restored Voting Rights Act, and we declare that we will use our full power to force this democracy to reckon with its people's plight. We will not be silenced, and we will not be unheard. This movement will not be turned around or turned back. Our votes are not supports, but demands to be heard and to take action. A movement that votes does not vote for any party. A movement that votes does not vote for any party or any one person. We vote for our people and we vote for our lives. We vote to summon a third reconstruction that can birth us out of an impoverished democracy and usher in a new world. So great. That sounds like Reverend Barber, doesn't it? And the organizational leaders. I think powerful words, and really sets us on our tone. So if you notice, we're talking about voting. So number one, we demand that every member of Congress publicly acknowledges the reality and pain of poverty. It says here again, 140 million people, including 43% of our entire population, 52% of our children who have died at a rate 2 to 5 times higher during this pandemic, and 250,000 of whom died from poverty and inequality every year. Recognize that this is a moral crisis that must be corrected, reckoned with, and repaired. This is an emergency. We need emergency action now to redress these injuries. Number two, we demand every member of Congress commit to creating and supporting legislation that reflects the third construction agenda, and that you can find that on our website, poorpeoplescampaign.org. Developed by poor and low-income communities. No action is available to this Congress to relieve this injury and protect our democracy should be taken off the table, no matter how close we are to an election. Number three, we demand a White House poverty summit with President Biden to allow this administration to meet with a delegation of poor and low-wealth people, religious leaders, economists, and to commit to an executive action plan to eliminate poverty in 2022. Number four, we declare that this campaign will engage in massive mobilization and outreach through every means available to us by visits, letters, petitions, candidate forums, and phone calls, advocating for our current representatives to take action now to address the needs of the poor and low wealth in this country. Number five, we pledge to return to Washington, D.C. in September 2022 to join 5,000 poor and low wealth persons and religious leaders, along with 100 economists, in nonviolent moral direct action in our next step of declaration and notification of these demands. Number six, this campaign announces its launch of a nationwide effort for the next 143 days to register and educate poor and low-income communities to vote in every election for candidates who commit to a third Reconstruction agenda to address poverty and low wealth from the bottom up. We must vote in historic numbers for our ancestors, for our children, for the generations to come whose lives and planet are under threat today. And lastly, we declare that we are a movement that votes. I think you get the message. We call on all poor and low-wealth people to march in mass assembly from here to the polls this November and to use your vote to make your voices heard. We will expand the we included in we the people and fight with every tool we have to ensure no voice is excluded from this democracy, no vote is denied, and no cry for justice rising up from this moral fusion movement is unrepresented at the ballot box. And I end with our slogan for Poor People's Campaign, forward together, not one step back. Thank you. So, questions? Mm-hmm.
Do you know when that March in September will be?
Yes, but it sounds like they're, instead of everybody, they're really targeting low income and religious leaders. But you as religious leaders, y'all could probably get involved. I'm not sure if the date has been set yet, because they're still trying to figure out, because you heard it's gonna be a protest, nonviolent, probably. I was able to go up on the anniversary of the Women's Suffrage March, and I joined 100 other women from across the country, so that was my first time getting arrested for nonviolence. So it was interesting. We blocked some streets. I think we were near the Supreme Court. DC is so used to us, they had a long table there where they just processed us outside. It was really not, pretty non-dramatic. And then the next day we had to go. So it's going to be something like that, and it's going to be on a lower scale. But religious leaders, yes, are going to be a part of that. I can find out the exact date to see if maybe your church or some leaders from the Unitarian Church might want to be involved. Yes, yes.
Do you know how it's coming along as far as getting low-income people to come?
It's very difficult. I know for us, Carolyn always asks me, because we're always looking for people to testify. If you remember, Barbara came to Bessemer a couple of times, so he's really been kind of, the Amazon workers. We got some testifiers from there, so that's the way he organizes. Of course, wherever he's going to come, people will kind of gravitate. We've been involved with the coal miners strike. So that's why the unions were so heavy up in D.C. But even though I work with low-income people, trying to convince them to become a part of the organization and to tell their story publicly is difficult, because even in D.C., the ones, some of the public testifiers said, "This is hard for me. It's embarrassing." And Barbara has really done a good job once he pulls certain people who testify in, he tries to pull them into leadership and as a part of the statewide coalition. So I'm a part of the statewide organizing group. Carolyn Foster just pulled me in, to be a part of that. But for me, it's been difficult to find, even though I work with low-income people, to get them to come into this organization and to be a part of it and to work for it is difficult. Even like with our list, we've got like 4,000 people on our list for Tuscaloosa, but they're not going to do anything. Well, I'm not going to say they're not going to do anything. They'll do maybe letter campaigns or email kinds of things if we send them, but to get them to come and really organize, because most of them are busy already. I can guarantee you the majority of people on the list, like if the people on the list from your church, they're already out doing things. They're working for a rise. They're working for other organizations. So that's half the battle. But the other one is enough of a connection to convince them to be a part. And we probably need to do a little bit more outreach. One of the things we've been talking about is a statewide committee is doing much more in the rural areas. We haven't done as much work in the rural areas, so we're trying to organize. But like even, I've been trying to pull John in to the Poor People's Campaign, but he's busy, doing 10,000 other things. He's in Greene County. He's a leader in Greene County. His wife just ran for school board. But usually the people that would probably be involved or already involved. Now, there's some low income who are trying to survive, so they don't maybe see this as a priority. So that's going to be our job to convince them to. And I don't, usually like with the Greater Birmingham Ministries, they have food ministries, and those would be the type where you have touch to really pull people in. Food ministries, housing ministries, the homeless ministries, medical. Some churches have clinics where that would be a way to kind of pull people in. So, and we've got to do more of that. And think about it. Do you know? I mean, I don't have a lot of low income. I have some in my circles. Right? I have a hairdresser. My husband might go to a barber shop. And actually, I have people at my church as well. So those would be touch points. But to get them to get organized, like we've got materials at our church, just a few people that I know sign up. But more and more, one of the daughters said she wanted to get involved. So it's just really slow, consistent organizing. And it's the same thing with voter registration, right? You don't have loads of people coming in saying, yeah, I want to vote. We actually did some, like a Medicaid expansion event. We had some voter registration, and there were people who said they didn't want to vote. So spending the time to really educate them and kind of talk to them and understand why they're resistant would take some time. But if you've got thoughts on how to improve our numbers here in Tuscaloosa and get people who would be willing to step forward and be visible, that would be great. Sure. Thank you.
Dr. Pam, thank you so much. This was really educational and inspirational to hear more about the Poor People's Campaign. Love the slogan, "Forward Together, Not One Step Back," and this idea of fusion fits really well with the Unitarian Creed, where we're saying we're learning from all the world's religions and wisdom traditions. And I know our Social Justice Committee has been working hard to support this effort. So
They probably were at the rally.
yes, yeah. So thank you so much. This really fits in with what we do so well. So let's open our hymnals to number 95, which is "There Is More Love Somewhere," number 95. And rise in body or spirit as you are able. words also come from William Barber, Reverend Barber. He says, "We need a moral movement across the nation, an indigenously homegrown, state-based, state government-focused, deeply moral, deeply constitutional, anti-racist, anti-poverty, pro-justice, pro-labor, transformative fusion movement. A movement that is about the moral fabric of our society, guided by a deeply moral and constitutional vision of what is possible." May it be so. As we extinguish this flame, let us remember this truth. We can hear it in the water, in wood, and in stone. We are earth of the earth, and we are bone of its bone. Take the light with you and share it across this earth. Now for our postlude. Well, our service has ended, and we have some coffee and cookies, and we hope you will stay for a few minutes for conversation and fellowship. Thank you all for coming. All right.